Well, it's 1 o'clock, guys. I want to welcome everybody to this webinar from AICA. My name is Brett Spader, and this is the Charolais Bull Buyer Market Research webinar, connecting Charolais Bull Buyers in terms of messaging and market research and media types as we think about better ways to communicate our breeding operations to potential buyers of seed stock genetics. So really glad to have a good turnout here online. You heard the recording annotation there too. We're going to make this available to anyone that couldn't be here in person. We're also going to email each of you sorry, I'm allowing a few folks to come in here. We're going to email out as well a market research document, which has essentially these slides for you. So we want this to be the first of hopefully many conversations that you have with our staff. We're really excited to bring this type of information to you guys. And as always, if there's things that you're curious about, if there's things you feel like that the association can do on your behalf, we'd love to hear them. And so I'm easy to reach. You can find my email and my phone number on the website as well as the rest of staff. And I just want to welcome everybody sincerely. We will, like I say, record this as well as have some questions at the end for anyone that's got questions. We will be pretty casual otherwise. So with that, again, welcome, and we'll go ahead and get started. I think we as seed stock breeders, a lot of times we go out and we breed the type of cattle we like. We're experts in how we care for them. We're experts in how we select them. And sometimes marketing falls back towards the back and it creates some confusion around the best ways to do it. And that's rightfully so, because every Charolais breeding operation is a little different, isn't it? Every breeding philosophy, set of breeding philosophies, certainly your customer bases are all a little different. And the behavioral drivers as to why people buy cattle are they vary from region to region in different age demographics. There's a wide variety of different things that come into play. And so every Charolais breeding operation deserves to have a unique look at a marketing plan. And that becomes a pretty frequent question when you're assisting people with their marketing efforts. It's really hard, especially if you're getting started, to even know where to begin. And so we commissioned this market research project specifically around bull buyers, although we'll talk about that more in some different marketing updates coming up here this fall about the different things that matter to bull buyers versus seed stock breeders, and how we communicate through advertising the value of our brand, which essentially is just what we do and why we do it, and how we communicate that really clearly to people to encourage them to enter into a relationship with us when we're selling these genetics. So like I mentioned, going to send this out to everybody that joined here via email. We certainly are excited to have you here. And without further ado, I'll just start to dig into the data. So a bit about the research project itself. We sent out both via direct mail and print and digital aspects, and we surveyed a wide swath of Charolais bull buyers from all across the United States. And I'm excited to get into this data more. I think as we start to break it down by age demographic, even by different regions of the country, it's going to give some pretty great insights, especially for you as you're trying to maybe market bulls in Tennessee versus the approach you may take to market bulls in Montana. And so when we think about this, we saw a really nice response. And we put some questions in here to kind of just make sure we had some validity to what we did. A lot of the questions and information I'll present today are going to be pretty marketing centric. There were some other good insights that came out of this market research project as well that we'll utilize for some other association information as well. So looking forward to kind of getting full use of this market research project. But again, at the end of the day, it's about enabling you guys to have success as breeders of Charolais cattle, enabling you to do a better job in connecting with bull buyers, both existing as well as potential, and then ultimately giving that success to the breed because you guys are in business for the long haul. So we start off with a couple of validation questions. The first two being age demographics and operation involvement. And so whenever I do projects like this, I really like to know that we're getting the key decision makers represented here. And so when we think about that, I think honestly, anything above 70 or 80% of the respondents being a key decision maker, that's a very high number. In this case, 93% of the respondents to this survey were the ones that ultimately were the decision makers. So to me, that's very important because that tells me this data that we're going to present and hopefully utilize to make decisions on, it's really sound. And it's going to show us how to directly connect to the people that are making those purchases today. Now, having said that, there is a younger generation or younger generations that are equally important in those operations. And so it kind of begs the question of how do we make sure we're connecting with those that are making those decisions today? And also, for those of us that want to be in business for 20 and 30 years, how are we setting up that next generation to get interested in what we offer in terms of bull offerings? And also, how can we better connect with them? So, I'm going to reserve that recruiting the next generation for some other marketing avenues that we do later on. Today, I'm going to concentrate on those that are specifically purchasing bulls today. And so when we think about that, it's not a big shock to say, as a general rule, those are people that are more established in the industry. And that's what you see in the age demographic slide portion on the left. 75% of the bull buyers surveyed were over 46 years old. And there's a lot of reasons for that. To have a cattle operation today, there's a lot of value in renting or owning land. There's chutes, there's tractors, there's trucks, there's certainly purchasing the cattle themselves. I know when I was 21 or 25 or even 30, I wasn't in a position to have my own large scale operation by any stretch of the imagination. So these are things that we're going to grow into. One thing that's always been interesting as I've done these type of projects over the last 8 years is increasingly those that are over the age of quote unquote United States retirement age that are in the cattle industry. And obviously, we've got some folks that have been in that business their whole life and they really have a passion for it. It really allows you to start to think about how you position and create genetics for those that are not of the younger age demographic, and also brings in how we communicate with them while we're also communicating to those that have different media preferences at a younger age demographic. But I guess I'll just point to that graph and say, when we're thinking about creating those genetics, when we see things like docility rank incredibly high, well, there's a real reason for that, I feel. And also, when we're thinking about creating a marketing plan for people, we've got to bear in mind we're trying to reach people of a wide variety of age demographics. And if you have to choose, this is an age demographic to maybe start with the core of your marketing spend, and then start to expand out into other areas. A separate session that we'll do will be specifically around social media. And we'll break out these age demographics by media consumption and social media. It always gives some really great insights just to know how to best reach people in a digital sense and via social media and via strategy based on the different age demographics. You may very well find you're putting a different message out to those that are 60 and older versus those that are, say, 36 to 45. Could be the exact same offering, but they certainly can do multiple things well. And so being able to customize your advertising approach as well as your ad messaging, I think is a great spot to be in 2024. And for us to do the right job in communicating to bull buyers, that's a pretty important thing to understand. So another validation question that I like to include is approximately how many females do you have on your operation? There's an old cowboy rule that you never ask somebody how many cows they have or how many acres they're on, but this is a gentle way of asking that. And it gives you a pretty nice perspective to understand where Charolais fits in terms of Charolais genetics in the beef industry. I've worked with several small breeds and even very, very small breeds that are very hobby based. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of validity to breeders and members that are smaller operations at all. But it is interesting in this breed to see just how many head of females, those that are purchasing these bulls, have an impact over. We way outdo that national average of the beef cow herd of being 44 head if you kind of look at this from a statistical perspective. So, with 60% of these respondents, of these bull buyers, being above national average, that just tells us how relevant Charolais genetics are in the beef industry today and how important of a role they play in how things move forward. One more validation question, and this one can kind of be interpreted a few different ways, but increasingly we have folks that in order to make it in ag, they have a job in town, or maybe their spouse has a job in town. And so sometimes it's good to also look at what percentage of their take home income is comprised of the cattle operation. It tends to change your perspective a little bit in terms of what you invest in. If cattle are just kind of a fun thing to do, we obviously want to encourage that and reward that. But that's a little different mindset that you're trying to attract versus someone that's leaning on this as their primary business interest. And so with 41% of these having all their annual income be 75% or greater from cattle, that tells us that those folks that are buying Charolais bulls, they're certainly in the beef industry, they're certainly in the cattle business. And so this is a really great set of data that we can dig into from there. So when we think about reaching bull buyer customers, I kind of like to go back to the basics to start, and we'll talk a little bit more about why and how they're selecting the bulls that they select. But I also like to know how they market their end product. What kind of marketing success can we create for them so that they continue to buy Charolais bulls? And so one of those basic questions around that was simply, how do you market your calves? And certainly the local auction market. And again, these are fun things to start to tap into from a regional perspective, but the local auction market still really reigns supreme. And I will say over the last 10 to 15 years, you do hear from different folks, oh, will we even have sale barns anymore? Will it even be relevant anymore? Well, the research says it is. And so I think if you looked at that trend and you saw some of the resurgence of some younger blood coming into those auction markets here in the last 5 years, you know, partnering with those local auction markets, understanding what opportunities they provide your bull buyer customers, that maintains a really important function in creating the success for your bull buyers that you need to have happen. Having said that, those that retain ownership, I know this is the first time we've done this specific to the Charolais breed, but I would argue that number's probably grown over the last 5 to 10 years. And so while we have folks that are utilizing those relationships at an auction market level to market their calves, we also have folks that are seeing the value of keeping their calves all the way through the feeding sector. And thus they're picking some different genetics. Obviously, auction market, if you're selling there, you're thinking about performance at weaning and pounds, and you're thinking about getting live calves on the ground. Whereas if you're finding more people that are interested in retaining ownership, they're very concerned with carcass and in merit in terms of carcass quality. They're thinking about marbling especially. And so being able to create the right sets of genetics based on what it is that they market and their marketing endpoint, I think is really important. Video sales, we did a podcast recently with Dennis Metzger. That's one to go back and listen to on the Charolais USA podcast if you're curious about video sales. Obviously, that kind of helps set the tone for us as we market through the fall at auction markets and private treaty. Those summer video sales really give us an early glimpse at what the fall should shape up to be for Charolais cross cattle. And then private treaty. So as you work with in those cases, a private treaty buyer, it's a little easier to get that direct feedback on the cattle, how they perform, and in some cases, what you need to change or tweak or do a little different as you create those genetics. So then I'd like to roll into the second question on this slide, and that is, why Charolais? And so as we looked at this particular set, and again, these are great conversations to have with all your bull buyers or all your prospective bull buyers. These are important lessons to take home to realize, one, why people are buying the bulls that they're buying today, and two, is there a set of people out there we can start to recruit to buy Charolais bulls that maybe we haven't touched yet? But for the first bucket, when we're looking at those that are using Charolais bulls, performance is absolutely still the key. Performance at weaning, performance at yearling. And so obviously the breed's well known in terms of the ability to create performance. Obviously, these are important things to bear in mind as we're creating those mating decisions. And even as we think about marketing that, bear that in mind. Like, that's the number one rule for most of these folks. Performance still pays. Pay weight still counts. And so don't be afraid, even though we talk about it frequently, to make sure they understand how your operation can deliver that added performance, deliver that added pay weight. It's a very, very important piece. Feed conversion, feed efficiency, however you want to term it, that's an important thing moving forward too. Depending on what the cost of corn is, obviously bearing that in mind, and you'll see more data initiatives come out of AICA in and around feed conversion and feed efficiency in the upcoming year to 24 months. But that's an important part of Charolais genetics too. Market value, disposition, increased red meat yield, heat tolerance, these are all highly ranking things. And so as you get this document, I'd welcome you to, again, to kind of take it, digest it a little bit more, think about how your operation and your breeding philosophies that probably align pretty closely with these things, some of these things, or many of them, and how you can position that in the catalogs you put out, in your digital ads, in your print ads, and even just in your word of mouth. I think sometimes the Charolais breed, we don't always do as good a job about being positive about those attributes that our breed can provide to bull buyers. And this is a cheat sheet for us. This is what we need to be talking about when we get on those calls with those bull buyers. So then we start to go into a little more of predictive type questions. And this is always good for me, because when I think about creating genetics, we're going to generally market those genetics in 2 to 3 years. So if I put a straw semen into a cow, or if I flush a donor, I'm making a decision today that I hope is going to create the best genetics of my entire life, of everything I've ever done. The real challenge is when I'm creating those genetics, when I'm thinking about it, getting excited about it, rarely am I thinking about how I'm going to build an audience starting today to sell those cattle to in 2 to 3 years. And so that's why we put this question in, to say, okay, looking out over the next 3 years, what's our market opportunity look like? And it's been really great to dig into more numbers. We've seen a strong increase of the number of Charolais bulls sold in the last 5 years, and we've seen a strong increase in their value at public auction in the last 5 years. And that's been great to see, especially in the face of diminished cow herd numbers on the national cow herd average. So that's an increase in market share. That tells me we're doing some things really right, and we want to keep doing more things right. But as we think about how many bulls and what that opportunity is, we're looking at purchasing a nice amount of bulls, certainly over the next 3 years. Let me double check one thing. I apologize. So we had a typo on here. This graph on the left says, how many do you plan to purchase in the next 3 years? That title should be, how many have you purchased in the last 3 years? And so transitioning over into the graph on the right side, of your bull battery that you've purchased in the last 3 years, what percentage of that bull battery has been Charolais? And it's great to see that number that is exclusively purchasing Charolais bulls in the last 3 years is about 40%. We'll look at a slide here in a minute, which is equally exciting, which shows that that number increases when you go from how many bulls they've purchased in the last 3 years to how many they plan to purchase in the next three. And so there's some things to pull out of this graph too. So when you're thinking about that 40%, that's fantastic. That's a strong number. But when we're looking at the rest of that, the other 60%, they're utilizing other breeds, aren't they? And we recognize that. We recognize Charolais is in a unique advantage to be the cross-breeding terminal heterosis breed of choice. So in some cases, they're buying another breed, maybe to breed heifers too, or to create some replacement commercial females out of. And so I only stress that to say, when we're recruiting these folks through our advertising, through our marketing, bear that in mind. In some cases, again, those of you that sell bulls, you know this, they get to choose how many bulls they're Charolais and how many are not. And especially if you look at the number of bulls they've purchased in the last 3 years, getting them to change from only purchasing 3 to say 4 or 5 Charolais bulls, that really can have a significant impact if you do it over a wide spread of commercial bull buyers. And we see certainly those that are purchasing bulls, Charolais bulls especially, in many cases, they're purchasing multiple bulls. So we want to continue to communicate the genetic advancement tools that we have, the marketing programs like Char Advantage, certainly the validity of what we do and the support that we give, as well as some of the customer service things that you guys offer. And if you want some ideas around customer service, there's a great podcast coming out with AICA field representative Cody Beck about some great customer service options that he's seen throughout his travel. And so that can help you kind of better understand how we win over some of these multi-breed bull buyers, because we've already got a foot in the door in terms of getting them to buy Charolais bulls. We just need to encourage them to buy more of their bull battery being Charolais bulls. So again, apologize about that typo. With this slide, it is indeed how many bulls you plan to purchase in the next 3 years. And again, the numbers on that plan to purchase doesn't change much. That kind of just tells me we're in a pretty stable set of bull buyers. You know, there are certain breeds of cattle where folks in 6-year spans are completely in and out of the business. And I have not found that to be the case in the Charolais breed. As a general rule, those that come be a part of our breed, it's very stable and they've got the ability to stay in business for a long time, and they do stay in business for a long time. So when we're thinking about that 6-year span, it's exciting to think that these bull buyers are still planning certainly to use Charolais genetics. The really interesting and fun thing for me was in thinking about those that were going to buy bulls in the next 3 years, those that are planning to buy 100% Charolais bulls, remember that number in the last graph was 39%. In this number, it's 47%. So that gets me excited. That tells me maybe people bought some bulls of other breeds and they didn't deliver the performance that they needed in this cattle cycle or for their operation. Maybe they started to retain some heifers and they bought some heifer bulls of another breed, and now they're going to invest in Charolais bulls to come in and breed those cows. There could be a wide variety of reasons, but those type of numbers, even though they don't seem like a whole lot, when you take that across the massive scale of tens of thousands of bull buyers in the United States, or if not more, that becomes a very real number that has a direct impact on those of us that are selling bulls private treaty, through online sales, or with a standard production sale. So what factors impact their bull buying decision? And so we put breed of bull in there always because it kind of just is a validation question. If that were to score very low, I would really question all the data that we have in here, because all the other data points kind of compile together to tell us, yeah, the breed of bull is going to matter to them. But it's interesting to look at when they're evaluating bulls on average across, again, across the data, bull temperament was the number 2 thing. And I touched on that earlier with the age breakdown that we had. and also talked about how in some cases we have producers that are working in town and especially younger producers that have a job off ranch. Temperament really matters. And even if you are a 100% full scale rancher and that's all you do for a living, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, temperament's become just as important to you as it has anyone else because you need to do more with less. And so bulls that don't handle the way you need them to, create the type of calves that are hard on equipment, hard on your facilities. We don't have as much space for that in the beef industry as we used to. We roll into the third function there of how these folks are selecting through their bull buying decisions, and we look at that bull's individual performance. And so we as a breed, we as bull buyers in this breed, we've always done a really nice job of balancing data and real world application of that data. And so specifically what that bull did himself in terms of performance, it still really matters to these bull buyers. Followed up shortly under that by the genetic predictions of that bull, the EPDs of that bull. And so I think that's, to me, a pretty healthy thing to say, yeah, we're going to look in the pins, we're going to use a visual appraisal to understand what we're getting, and then we're also going to use these genetic tools that AICA creates to help us better understand how that bull is going to produce in our commercial operation at home. Just under that also is phenotype. And so again, kind of along those lines, we more or less identified bull's individual performance as its own weaning weight, its own yearling weight, its own birth weight, in some cases other aspects of individual data performance, and then also obviously how they look. So sound structure, foot structure, leg set, these are all really important things. Next into that would be the sire of the bull. So being able to communicate all these things in our advertising, as even sires, that's an important function. In some cases, they've utilized sires that have worked well or haven't worked well in the past, or certain sire groups that did what they needed them to or didn't. And so that tends to be where they go to next. And then under that, past experience with the breeder. And I guess I would have thought personally, past experience with a breeder would have ranked a lot higher. So when we're thinking about communicating with these folks, bear in mind, we want to do things to re-engage those past customers, to help them have a good deal of customer service and to feel very welcomed and supported by us. But also bear in mind all these high-ranking things that are up there in those brackets as well. So we want to make sure that we can clearly articulate the decisions that we're making in relation to what we're offering. I was kind of glad to see price of the bull was as low as it was. And that just tells me that, sure, price matters in everything. When we're going through life, we're always valuing and balancing things. We're thinking about, do we do a little more in this area and sacrifice a little more in that area? And so when we're thinking as a rancher about price and we're thinking about what we invest in cattle, we're not just competing with other Charolais bull operations. We're competing with other breed operations, and in many cases, there's a lot of different costs that go in with commercial operations. So yes, you're trying to sell a Charolais bull for as much as we can, but you may very well be competing with in the back of his mind if he's going to buy a new truck that year or if he needs to upgrade some working facilities. So I guess I was pretty encouraged that price of the bull honestly was fairly low in relation to all the other points of value that we can provide through genetic selection decisions as well as through marketing decisions. The rest of that rounds out with a bull being registered, which honestly, I know that doesn't seem very high, but when you look at it compared to other breeds, it's actually kind of right in check or maybe even a notch above. And then location, in today's era, we've got a wide variety of ways to do delivery options. We've got a ways to bid online, and so location isn't the deal breaker maybe that it used to be. So we mentioned EPDs, those genetic tools that we're using to create predictions for how the cattle will perform with their new homes. And so we asked which ones are most important. And calving ease and weaning weight and birth weight were the leaders. And so I've certainly seen in the last 10, 15 years within this breed, there's been a lot of selection for cattle with moderate birth weights that reduce calving problems, but still deliver that performance that's needed and wanted, if you remember the previous graph. And so it's kind of interesting to think through. Certainly we're getting them in the door with performance, but also we're bearing in mind that for many of them, calving ease is a factor right alongside weaning weight. Milk, marbling, scroll circumference, ribeye area, and so on, those all also factor in. So then if we go from what we've seen in the past in terms of their preferences, and we think about, again, what they're going to do in the next few years, what factors will determine where you purchase your bulls, who you choose to purchase those bulls from. And so in this case, previous experience with a breeder is factoring in heavily, location is factoring in more heavily, phenotype and cost then round that out, and then genotype, and then obviously how the bull looks on video and some of these selection aspects that come along with that as well. Breeder websites, print advertising, direct mail, and social media, they ranked a little lower than I thought maybe, but also at the same time, these are great lessons to take out of this, bearing in mind that we need to do some level of those things, obviously, to recruit people. And then also at the same time, we need to bear all the data in mind as we move through it. So then we kind of do some additional media questions as we go through these type of projects, knowing that sometimes people go to certain media sources because they want to see ads about cattle, they want to see cattle, and in some cases they want to go to be informed. And so we give them the option to tell us about where they're receiving their beef industry news, not their worldly news, and where they're getting their information. And again, not a shock, websites are the strongest. And you'll see these numbers don't add up to 100% because obviously people tend to find information in multiple ways. So that's probably the first point that I'll pull out here. When we're creating marketing plans, when we're trying to communicate to bull buyers, we've got to hit them from a variety of different angles. That's going to allow us to encourage them to make a large scale purchase. And if they purchase a bull, that is a large scale purchase. That is not a convenience play of buying socks on Amazon. We want to make sure we're giving them multiple touch points to bring them deeper into the decision-making cycle. And so that starts to give you a little bit of framework. We'll talk about marketing and how they're accessing sales and things like that in a moment. But at least when it comes to beef industry news, and this is good for AICA staff too, to understand how we can best communicate to bull buyers. The website's very, very strong in 2024. We were really pleased to see the commercial publications, the Source and the Edge, also ranked incredibly high here. And so thinking about that age demographic, knowing that print is still an important part of what we do alongside the digital tools that we have, it's exciting to see that we can still access people in the right ways, whether it's those commercial publications that we publish, as well as the information we put out in digital senses, just like this here today. Facebook, again, news and information from Facebook. I always kind of smile at that, but I'm guilty of it too. I don't always watch a lot of news. I oftentimes pick up a phone, and a lot of my access to news and information comes directly in my hand. So Facebook is a pretty relevant part of distributing news and information to this set of Charolais bull buyers. Utilizing other print publications, so thinking about your other regional ag or beef industry publications, perhaps a state cattleman's magazine, those are still getting heavy play here as well. And again, we're not talking about an 18 to 24-year-old age demographic. We're talking about that large subsection of actual decision makers that we surveyed here and the response that we got. I was really pleased to see under print publications, AICA Fieldman was a relevant part of this conversation too. We're very fortunate in this breed to be one of 3 breeds that still has a fully dedicated field staff. And whether you're a breeder or a bull buyer, either one, they're in a position to help guide you. They're in a position to provide information, answer questions, and ultimately bring input back to the association when we think about that personal touch. To round out the rest of those that are interesting, YouTube. Um, I got a kick out of that one. I won't lie. I use it too. Sometimes I get into this market research and I'm like, oh, is that right? And then I find myself doing the exact same thing the market research did. But YouTube is tied to the strategy behind Google, and everyone searches on Google. So it ties to certainly video applications. And increasingly, I find myself hopping on YouTube to learn how to do something, whether it's work on a sink at my house or whatever it may be. And so YouTube is still a pretty relevant part of disseminating information, meetings, and events. Those probably rank lower than they did 20 years ago. And I think we know that it's harder and harder to get away from home, especially in today's day and age. University and extension, email blasts, veterinarians, those are all valid sources, certainly for people, again, when we're thinking about distributing news and information to those bull buyers. So if we pivot that and we go out of okay, this is where they're learning, and we probably want to have ads alongside where they're learning, right? But we also want to make sure we're in the places where they're searching for cattle, where they're looking for upcoming sales. In this case, they're going to social media and websites as 1 and 2. Not far under that, though, we've got sale catalogs. So when we think about establishing a marketing plan, and we'll talk more about that in future installments, how we take data like this and balance it with our brand, what we want to communicate from our operation. We're going to take data like this and we're going to say this is a great starting point. Again, everybody deserves to have something a little different, something a little customized. But when you're starting to think through, hey, where do I put my time, my energy, my resources, my money? We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but this is kind of, again, a quick start guide, if you will, to understanding how people are learning about upcoming sales. So social media, websites, sale catalogs, print publications, and word of mouth. Word of mouth, sometimes we take that for granted. But I had a good conversation with a breeder the other day, and we were talking about how a bull buyer had come in and had a great experience. They went home. The next year, a couple of his neighbors came, and then over time, a handful of guys came from that far-reaching area because he had a great customer experience with that first bull buyer and because the genetics really worked for them. So word of mouth, that just ushers in the need to make sure that if I'm visiting with someone, a neighbor, a friend at the coffee shop, whatever I'm telling them about you or whatever I'm telling them about my bull provider, that they can then go find this information very easily. So the name of your website, being able to get easy access to get on a catalog list, the ability just to reach somebody, I know is a big thing. Making sure cell phone numbers are posted on your website. You got to put yourself in their mindset of saying, hey, I just talked to this guy. I'm not sold, but it looks interesting. Now, what path do we create for them to come in, learn more about your operation through advertising, through outreach, and get excited about purchasing a bull on sale day? So we were talking a bit there about CPI, and we were talking about some of the tools that we offer. And again, we've got a great set of tools, which has specifically been created to help Charolais breeders market registered females, to market bulls, and also to market show heifer prospects. And so in the last 12 months, what actions have been taken based on some of those efforts? We saw a really nice response here. And it starts to set up that pathway that we're talking about. We don't want them just to see an ad and never think about it again. We want them to see that print ad and visit a website, or see that digital ad, click on it, and go to a website. We see they also requested sale catalogs. That's very high for this particular type of research. Or they viewed a sale catalog online, also very high. So that tells me that this set of tools is working very, very well. I think if you were to pick up a newspaper, and if they even have those anymore, if you were to look at a more general type of a print publication or a more general type of advertising, the response rate probably wouldn't be 60%. It would be much, much, much lower. But because we're so targeted in what we do here, because we're specifically creating audiences of those that appreciate and want and need Charlet genetics, you can rest assured that the value that you spend here is going to get a really strong result. So I'll also throw in here, when we're creating this kind of path for people to learn more about us, we're buying an ad, and sometimes we say, oh, well, that ad didn't do any good. I didn't get any calls. And that's a real opportunity to look at that and say, okay, is that what you asked them to do in the ad? Or did you ask them to learn a little bit more? And did you put your website down there at the bottom? Not everybody's comfortable picking up the phone and calling someone based off seeing an ad. And so bearing in mind that if we can show them print, we can send them a sale catalog, we can show them digital advertising, and we can get them back visiting that website or visiting that online sale catalog or videos frequently, that's much more likely to stay up on their radar and get them to kind of fall in love with something or get convinced that something we have to offer is of great value to them. So when you're thinking about creating your ads, I'm a big fan of a call to action. Where, if someone's interested in that ad, what do you want them to do next? And spelling it out. With digital ads, it's a little easier because they just click on it and they go to your website. Now, when they get to your website, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to request a sale catalog? Well, don't bury that back several pages in the back. Do you want them to email you or call you, or you have to think through the process that you want them to go through, and you have to put yourself in their shoes to realize it's not always as obvious as we think it is when we make these ads and when we think about this ad strategy moving forward. Visiting a breeder's social media page, no doubt that's increased a lot too. And I think sometimes we see bull buyers utilizing social media more so as a direct look into that operations daily function or weekly function. I think a lot of people with their websites, they kind of update them once a year, good, bad, and different. Whereas social media makes it pretty seamless to introduce them to what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it in terms of creating these genetics. And so see there, they visited social media and they viewed sale catalogs more than they called breeders. And so resetting our expectations a little bit, but also bearing in mind when we need to have all that sale information on our social media page early. And we need to be constantly telling the story of why these genetics will work for them, not just posting a video. That video needs to say, this is an impressive bull, but here's why he matters to your operation. Plus, there's 100 more just like him. Or here's what you can find as a small sampling. Click here to view the videos for these 3 reasons and how they can benefit your operation. So also, this probably isn't going to be a big shock. Many people shop or look for cattle using a variety of different devices. In this case, we didn't allow them to pick multiple devices. Rather, we wanted to know what the most used was. And again, it's probably not a shock, but it is definitely mobile phones. And we see that in our digital advertising analytics as well. And so one reason I include this here is if a vast majority, a strong majority of people are seeing your offering, one, you should be serving up digital ads that find them on their phones. And we offer that at AICA in a really, really great way. Two, your ads should be easy to read on digital phones, whether they're interactive, like video type function, whether it's just the size of the font, being able to streamline that down, because we're not going to take all the information we could put in a sale catalog or a one-page print ad. We're not going to be able to get that all into a little digital ad on the screen of a phone. And three, when you're on a phone, you don't have long to make a great first impression, do you? You're probably scrolling, you're probably glancing. There needs to be a really direct reason for them to click on that ad, to get into the sale offering, to get into the website. And it's an interesting challenge because we got to do that without a lot of words. If it's too small in terms of your font, they're not going to read it anyway, and it's just a waste of space. So when we think about positioning those digital ads, and your AIC fieldman can assist with this, obviously, as well as staff, it's really, really important to make sure those ads look the part in terms of what we're offering, and also talk about our brand fundamentals, what's most important to us. And if you're curious about what your brand fundamentals should be, well, one, that's why you breed cattle, the reasons why you breed the type of cattle you do. But again, go back to the start of this presentation, the start of this market research, and see how these guys are selecting their bull purchases. And I would recommend that you make sure your brand fundamentals, why you breed cattle the way you do, is closely matching with how people are selecting bulls in 2024. So bearing that in mind, desktop is probably the only one that's decreased a lot in the last 5 years. We've seen an increase in tablets. We've seen an increase or steady amount of laptops, but certainly we've seen mobile phone usage grow a lot. And then, desktops has cut way back as we've gotten more convenient with our technology. The bottom graph talks about how many people look at sale cattle videos online. And I don't know what I was expecting on this. That's actually the first time I've done that in this market research. It's a strong number, 86% of these people looking at sale videos online. And I think post-COVID, most all of us that have production sales probably started with an online bidding component. In many cases, that online bidding component, we also brought in pre-recorded sale videos. But I guess this would be a lesson for those that are maybe selling cattle private treaty or are looking to get established, just the importance of high quality cattle videos available online to recruit these buyers in. If 86% of your audience is looking for something in a certain space, you probably should figure out a way to get something to them in that space. And if you're just getting started, don't think it has to be everything. Again, we're talking about just capturing their attention, drawing them in deeper, hopefully delivering them to our doorstep. And if you're talking about selling private treaty, that's really what we're trying to do. So just a small handful of really high quality videos may be all you need to start to bring those potential bull buyers in. But we see it's a very relevant part of how we market cattle today. And I guess I'll support that also with this graph on the right that says how many sale catalogs on average are you viewing a year online? And this number is always really interesting to me because it's always pretty high. I like to look at sale catalogs online. I've always wondered if lots of commercial people look at the places where they're currently buying bulls and looking at those catalogs online, or if they're constantly kind of shopping. And in this case, it looks like they're looking at multiple. I mean, 14% looking at more than 30, that's a lot. Looking at 20 and higher, that's up over 32%. So a third of these folks are looking at least 20 different sale catalogs online every single year. And so it's an active thing that's grown over time. And it just again kind of brings in some thought processes around how we publish those things, how we attract people through social media, through digital advertising. In some cases, they may have a print copy of their catalog at home, and they may just not pull it up. They may have it at home and they may pull it up on their phone just to glance at something. So there's a lot of ways to encourage them to look at those online catalogs, and it's a really important part of what we do today. So from there, when you're creating that sale catalog, either in print or online, what are the most important aspects? And anyone that sat down to create a sale catalog, there's expense to that. So how you choose to use your space determines how many pages you're going to print, how much paper you're buying, your print costs, and increasingly your postage costs. We've had something like 7 postage increases in 3 years. It's not getting any cheaper, which has driven a lot of people into more digital in terms of what they do. I still believe in a printed sale catalog if it's going to the right audience, if it's going to someone where we could see a return on that investment. But either way, there's a real cost assigned to it. So when we're thinking about the priorities that go into that, what are the most important things to a bull buyer when he looks online at that sale catalog? Because he may only look at 3 or 4 pages and then get out. Or when he picks it up out of the mailbox and he starts to leaf through it. EPDs were the most important thing in terms of those surveyed of what they were looking for, shortly followed by pedigree and that animal's individual performance, weaning weight, yearling weight, etc. So what that tells me is catalogs are really built to deliver a lot of detail. Those digital ads are meant to capture people's attention, but they're not going to deliver that high degree of detail that these guys need to make a full decision. And so when they're going to your sales catalog, we want to be sure we're giving them as much of that detail as we possibly can. And as we're laying that thing out, that detail still matters. Breeding philosophies in history and ranch location also scored pretty high. I thought breeding philosophies was interesting because that's probably an area that we as bull sellers could do a better job of. Traditionally, that bull sale catalog has a welcome letter. We talk sometimes about our breeding philosophies a little bit there. We may have some customer service things on the inside front cover, but it's pretty rare to see someone really set out why they breed the type of cattle they do in great detail. I guess I read this data and it says there's an opportunity for that. People would probably respond to that. You got down into the color and the number of pages, the number of lots, the design, that really didn't rank very high. So not that you want to do a bad job. I think we all want to put a professional product out when it comes to sale catalogs, but it was interesting to see that data really reigned supreme when it came to what encouraged these guys to view these sale catalogs. Now, when we talk about actual advertisements, and we always like to see what's going to capture people's attention on their print ads, on their digital ads, animal pictures, animal EPDs, sale information, and video footage were the highest ranking things. And so this just probably brings home a point of imagery. We want to make sure we've got a great set of pictures. We want to make sure we've got really solid video footage on these ads. And when we say, that being the digital ads that we can put out, including relevant EPDs certainly appears to be an important part of this process too. And then obviously sale information, just so we know the date, the location, where to get more information. Those are very important things, whether it's a print ad or a digital ad. So we've talked a little bit about catalogs and we've talked a little bit about ads. And ultimately, a lot of times we want to flow people through our website, right? We want to use these different means and mechanisms to bring them into a place that's uniquely our own, which is our website. And so when we ask them what are they most interested in when they get to a site, bulls for sale, very strong. Obviously, it's a bull buyer survey, so that's good. Pictures of cattle and sale information were very, very important. So what I like to think about is when they're looking at a website on a phone or a laptop or a desktop, what's the first thing we're going to show them? I think it's important to show them what they came for and then start to communicate the things that other things we have to tell them. And so certainly making sure those websites are updated, talking about what the offering is, showing those pictures, showing that sale information, especially if they're looking on their phone, making it easy. I think that makes a ton of sense. And then rolling into those different reference sires, dams, bloodline info, and video footage obviously being important as well. I thought it was interesting that pictures of the operation and contact info kind of scored pretty low. Maybe that's just a function of more social media use, because certainly that was a higher ranking function as we looked at that as well. So how do they find cattle websites to visit? Well, internet search is an important part of that. And that's really good because our Charlet digital offering keys in on people that search for Charlet terms and it serves ads up to them. And so if you've ever shopped for something online and kept seeing ads for it, that's essentially how our Charlet digital advertising works, one part of it. Social media is another great way to recruit people in to see that, as well as sale catalog and print advertising. And then word of mouth. We don't always think about that. We think about being in a digital sense a lot of times. But again, thinking about that referral, thinking about that customer testimonial to another bull buyer, being able to quickly say, hey, you should go to spaderranch.com to learn more about that operation. That's really important because in some cases, people are just talking about things. So you need to be able to search for key terms to get them into your operations website or to have a very easy to remember domain name. So I know that was a lot of detail, guys, and some upcoming things that we're going to talk about more as we're thinking about marketing, recognizing that marketing is a year-round effort. We're going to bring some good stuff to you in terms of understanding your brand and how to communicate it, utilizing some of this data that we've seen, utilizing this as a bit of an early roadmap for what we want to do. We're also going to dig more deeply, as you see here, into social media planning and insights, especially breaking it down by age gaps, age demographics. And then we had some good requests from those that are new to the Charlet business and things that new breeders can do from a marketing perspective. So we're excited to start to bring more of those marketing resources to you. Like I mentioned, these throughout the course of the webinar, a couple existing ones that we've put out in the last 2 weeks are a couple episodes of the Charlet USA podcast, which features Hadley Shoddy in talking about planning for success, creating a roadmap to starting a production sale, as well as Cody Beck with his bull buyer customer service strategies. I didn't get the previous webinar on here, but we did have a great beef marketing session here a few weeks ago with David Bezak. Be sure to check that out on the charletusa.com website. We will also have an upcoming TSI webinar coming up. We haven't set the date, but it'll be in the next 2 weeks or so as we bring some new aspects of TSI to the table. And Dr. Bob Weber, one of our genetic consultants, will be the host on that. And then, of course, as always, we want to welcome any members to the AICA Fall Board meeting this year held in Kansas City, Sunday, October 27th, and then followed up on October 28th. So at this time, I'm going to take a drink of water, and I'd love to find out if anybody's got any questions before we start to wrap things up. You're making it too easy on me. Someone come up with something.
Hey Brett, that's Jim. Hey, what do you have a gauge for? Were these mostly commercial, or was there a sprinkling of purebred operations in the survey, or do you know?
We tried to cross-reference those that we felt were purebred and pull them out. Yeah, we did get some as we did that. We did have a really nice survey response. Kind of depends on how you define percentage of how we presented it in a digital sense. But in terms of kind of some of the more direct things, it was, I mean, it was pretty strong. It was probably about a 6%, 7% return, which anything above 2% when you're working these type of statistics, this type of field, unless you see a lot of variance, that's a strong number.
And it was sent out mostly through digital.
We also did a hard copy print aspect to non-member bull buyer functions that we have, as well as put it out in some print publications through the Edge and Source.
Perfect. Okay.
Good point, because I know that's always a question is, are people responding in print? Are they responding in digital? You know, are the things that we're seeing through these survey results largely weighted to one side or another? And I guess I feel pretty comfortable. I mean, to me, you know, we saw probably a pretty balanced response, and we certainly saw that through the course of these answered questions, that print is still very relevant. Sale catalogs are still very relevant. You know, to me, that indicates it wasn't just a strictly digital response. It wasn't anything like that. And the age demographics kind of support that. You know, I mean, I'm 44 and I like print and I like digital. And there's certainly those older and younger than me that kind of skew one way or another. So I think that those are all really good questions. Any other questions? Ideas? Anything that you are wondering about that either could be represented in this market research or maybe something else that we as staff can track down and provide information. All right. Well, you guys have been a great audience, and I really appreciate everybody joining today. As always, your AICA staff is here to support you. And so as you think about some of these things, and as we email this market research document out to you, if you do get some questions, please reach out to your field staff, reach out to anyone on the AICA staff. Feel free to send me a note as well. We'd love to help you. We'd love to help you make sure you have success within the Charolais breed and with Charolais genetics. And we look forward to having you join some future podcasts and future webinars as we present more information along these lines.
It's very helpful. We enjoyed it. Good
Excellent.
job.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate you being on. All right, guys. I hope you have a great week. Y'all be safe.